Just a couple weeks ago, I was at an international workshop, and I had the chance to interact with a bunch of folks from different universities, different backgrounds, and present my research and get some feedback on that. And that was a moment I was able to communicate so well with that group and be so comfortable with that group. That was a moment that really made me reflect on my time as an Igerter student and the training that I got there, and the nice interdisciplinary perspective and the command of the language of other disciplines in the bioenergy space. That was a very good experience for me. Another moment that I remember very vividly was participating in the bioenergy Igerter course sequence. And so I, as a member of the first cohort, went through the first version of that course as a student. The second year of the course, I participated as a TA. And then by the third year of the course, I got to be the instructor for the environmental assessment piece. And I remember when I first started that, working with that very talented, very diverse, and very inquisitive group of students, I remember thinking what a nice opportunity this was and what a great experience it was to be able to have one of my first teaching experiences with such a good group. So the Igerter program was significant for me in a few ways. I think one of the ways was as a networking tool and as an opportunity to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And now, you know, whenever I'm at a conference or a workshop or, you know, meeting with people from another university, I can go in and introduce myself as someone who came through the CSU Bioenergy Igerter program and explain my background and my connections to all the talented people, the other people that are associated with that program. And so that's a really nice resource for me to have now. And the other thing is that when I am in those different settings, in those interdisciplinary settings and meetings and workshops, again, I feel like because I've had such great interdisciplinary training, I'm very comfortable with the language of different groups and interacting with people with different backgrounds. Much more comfortable than I would be had I not gone through a nice interdisciplinary program like this. An important way that the program had an impact on me, I'd say, was in getting to know and getting to work with the other members of the first cohort. And I've had the opportunity to become very good friends with that group. And I've also had the opportunity to professionally collaborate with several members of the first cohort. I've got one paper published now with another member of that cohort, and two more that are in preparation. And so I think professionally for me, it was a really nice opportunity to become good friends with this group and also to become hopefully lifelong collaborators with the same group.
So the Igerter program actually, I think, overall made my PhD here worthwhile. I knew that I wanted to do bioenergy research, and I was very interested in doing something interdisciplinary, as it were, but my background as studying biodiesel, I really wanted to kind of move on. And so when I got here and we started kind of talking about new topics and kind of a broader perspective on how those topics actually worked, it led me to kind of find my dissertation topic and really shaped a lot of my PhD overall. But no, I think the Igerter was incredibly influential in how I went about my research and really kind of shaped a pathway for professionalization, what I actually want to do, and feeling like I actually have the skills to be able to pursue a career in bioenergy and specifically in synthetic hydrocarbons as a political scientist, but also as someone who knows the technology and can actually engage in dialogue with scientists and engineers and other people that are working in the industry, as well as the academic realm. I think it opened up a lot of new avenues for what I wanted to do. You know, in the past, when I was just studying kind of bioenergy, particularly biodiesel, I was a bit self-taught, actually. So I engaged in conversations about conversion technologies and kind of agriculture, but I didn't really have a structure. I didn't really have a backbone where I could go to a class and learn it, or have the resources of a lot of great instructors that really were experts in their field. So because of the Igerter, it was significant that I actually kind of had this great set of resources that I could go to develop my project in the way that I wanted to do so, and kind of gain that fundamental knowledge to make it to make it interesting in the first place. For me, it's been really fun because not only was I a student in the Igerter program that then went through, but then I've been teaching kind of the policy section. So I taught the policy section for the last 4 years. And that's been a great experience. I mean, I really enjoyed developing my own curriculum about it, talking about bioenergy policy, which is something that I'm very passionate about, but realistically not many people talk about. And so it was a lot of fun, but also very kind of educational for me. Again, kind of being able to kind of pursue my own career and kind of political science and my own interests, but also combine that with kind of the more scientific and technological aspects as well, and bring them all together, and then talk to people about that. And not just talk to people, but talk to PhD students that were really informed about the topic and also had a lot of interest in it and had a lot of passion for it. So that was very kind of unique, and again also helped me with my own research to kind of figure out which avenues were going to be more promising and which questions kind of needed more development from a really multidisciplinary perspective.
There's one particular moment that sticks out in my mind. It was in the second year of the program, and we were doing a group project in which we combined the economic, the policy, and the assessment aspects of our training. And up till that point, I had learned quite a bit about the technical, the chemistry and the biology and the engineering aspects of the biofuels, and I learned a lot about the challenges that are associated with those parts of it. And to be honest, I was more pessimistic about biofuels. However, when we did this project, I got a big boost in my confidence in biofuels as a viable solution for liquid transportation fuels in this country, because we were able to show that with a relatively minimal amount of usage of corn stover in the region around a theoretical plant, we were able to produce quite a lot of biofuels. And up till that point, I felt like feedstocks were a major concern, but with that project, I came to the realization that it really was a viable technology and that it was feasible to implement in a widespread way throughout the country and even the world. I think it's made me a better scientist and a better engineer. I think the very nature of the program being interdisciplinary has forced me to broaden my understanding of the science, of not just biofuels, but in everything. I think that perhaps I came into the program thinking that I had a pretty broad mind, but I think that one of the results of the Igerter program was to force me to broaden my understandings into other areas where I was not very comfortable, and to sort of prove to myself that it's doable, it's possible to learn these different techniques and to learn the concepts of these different focus areas. And I think that carried over into my research. I was much more willing to go off and learn about new aspects of my research, and much less hesitant to go out and talk to people who were outside of my field.
Realistically, I think that graduate programs, whether you're a hard scientist or a social scientist, really are professionalization pathways. The idea is that you just go to grad school for funsies, that you actually have an idea of what you want to do. And I did have a basic idea, but really through the Igerter program, again, it opened up kind of new industries. When I first joined the program, biofuels and bioenergy had been around for a long time, but the idea of actually a feasible synthetic hydrocarbon industry really was just starting to kind of make it on the scene. And now, particularly with my dissertation research about jet fuel, renewable jet fuel, green jet, that's kind of taken on a whole new realm, I guess you could say, a whole new world. And again, it was because they had the great instructors and the great courses and the experience of the Igerter program that I could actually kind of figure out what was going on and see the kind of trajectory of where it was heading, so that I could be at kind of the forefront of that research, at least in the political science field. Well, I think as a student, And as a researcher, particularly for my dissertation, I actually do want a literal career in bioenergy. That would be kind of the idea. And so, you know, in a lot of the ways about being able to work with engineers and scientists and talk about the kind of, especially the thermochemical conversion processes, that's been really important for me to understand kind of the bigger picture overall. And so again, I think that, you know, actually engaging in that kind of policy dialogue, it's very important to know the rest of the information too, seeing the bigger picture. But then as kind of an instructor for the course, I think that the, you know, participation in kind of the specific aspects, you know, beyond just the internship and beyond just the kind of different classes and the interdisciplinary approaches to sustainable bioenergy. It's again really helped me kind of verbalize aspects of bioenergy that really need more kind of introduction or more discussion in the kind of political and policy realms that again kind of get hidden because the focus is always about the technology, right? We need better technology, we need to fix that technology, we need to engineer it so that the system works. Well, realistically, the system can work perfectly, but if it's not going to be adopted by the political realm, if it's not going to engage in policy dialogues or kind of fit in that social political atmosphere that's culturally acceptable, then it's not going to function. And so to kind of really see where those gaps are and be able to kind of talk about them in a more direct way.
For my postgraduate work, for the time being, I'm going to stick around and do a postdoc here at CSU. With the group that I was involved with for my Igerter research. I think in general the networking was probably the best benefit from the Igerter program, and the fact that I know so many people now at CSU in different disciplines but all working on bioenergy. I feel like I'm very well integrated with the bioenergy research community here, and I feel like I'm very well prepared to collaborate with anyone in that community or to join in on grant proposals. I just had one of those go in yesterday, and I feel like it was the relationships and the contacts that I made in the Igerter program that made that all possible.
You know, at its very fundamental nature, the Igerter program is broad-based, and the whole concept is to bring us in and teach us about all of the aspects of biofuels, not just the parts that we specifically focus in. And I think in doing so, that makes the participants of the program much stronger candidates for the biofuels field. Myself in particular, I feel like I'm comfortable talking to some extent about the policy, about the biology, about the chemistry, the chemical engineering aspects, including my particular emphasis, which is in the mechanical engineering aspects of it, the engines, the combustion, that sort of thing. The main thing would be I would be much more comfortable applying to jobs in which biofuels were the main emphasis. With the boom in fracking, biofuels has definitely fallen out of favor, unfortunately. But the jobs are still out there, and I think that I feel much better qualified to apply to these jobs and excel in these jobs. At this point, I'm interested in jobs at national laboratories, also in industry, and possibly academia, but that's definitely third on the list. Again, I think it comes back to the interdisciplinary nature of the program, where we're coming in and being exposed to all these different aspects of biofuels as a concept. And because of that, I can sell myself as a broad-based engineer, a scientist, and I think that makes me more viable as a candidate for industry and national labs.
I came into the Igerter program in my second semester in graduate school, so I didn't have any research training before that, and so I feel like all of the research training and most of my graduate experience was really strongly affected by the Igerter program. And I think that being able to interact with the 4 Igerter program PIs right from the beginning of my participation there left a big impression on me, and you know, I was very impressed with how talented everyone was in that group, and how open everyone was, and how interested in collaboration everyone in that group of 4 was.
Well, I'm not a scientific professional, thank goodness. No, it's very interesting. I'm one of 3 kind of political scientists that were part of the Igerter program over the 6 years, so I'm already kind of an outlier case. And the truth is that, I don't have any formal scientific background. And now I find myself writing dissertation chapters about, hydrothermal liquefaction and its, possibilities down, macro and micro scale production, things like that. And so in that regard, I've definitely become more scientific, but as a non-scientific scholar, as a non-scientific researcher, I just really enjoy the idea that I can kind of explore all aspects of the topic. And I think that that's a downfall of kind of this split between the kind of hard or the soft or the natural and social sciences, because there's an unwillingness, I think, to engage in the other dialogue. It's not familiar. It's kind of hard to kind of get that background. And so I was able to get the background and really kind of go forward. And I think that just produces better research, and I think it produces just a better understanding. Because realistically, most political scientists don't understand the kind of scientific aspects of, well, anything, but particularly bioenergy. But if you can't understand the kind of production aspects, the consumption, the pipelines, the infrastructure, and everything in between, the rest of it doesn't really work.
The program experience that was most influential on me must have been the policy trip to Washington, D.C. And that was great in terms of being able to interact with folks at the different government agencies and get a sense of how policy is made and get a sense of how my research contributes to that policy and really see that research cycle. And then that experience was also a really great one in terms of getting to know the other students in my cohort and the people running the Igerter program. So in terms of bonding and making friendships, it was a really great experience. So the favorite activity would got to be the DC trip.
I would say I think there's 2 experiences that really kind of stood out the most. I really enjoyed the kind of Igerter specific classes. I mean, the other classes that I took also were very interesting and informative, but ultimately the 2 classes, the kind of the scientific aspects of bioenergy, and then the kind of the policy, economic, and life cycle assessment classes were also really interesting. And then to get to work with people in that realm. But I think the 2 kind of biggest things that really stood out that I really would not have had the opportunity otherwise is, one, do my internship opportunity, which I did in Washington, D.C. At the American Council on Renewable Energy, or ACORE. And I learned a lot, not only about kind of NGOs, right, non-governmental actors operating within the sphere of kind of bioenergy, renewable energy, and also kind of the problems that they face on a daily basis, but also some of the bigger agendas, the political agendas that we see and the political patterns. Because realistically, bioenergy, like all topics in the political realm, kind of fall in and out of kind of social focus and kind of interest. And so the question is, how do we continue that interest, and how do we convince people, particularly when you have a lot of interest groups working against you, that this is something that's viable and something that's positive and has economic benefits, political benefits, and ecological ones as well. And the second kind of big thing that stood out was really our trip to DC. I felt a little vindicated after we went there that I wasn't crazy, right? That I was the first political scientist to go through the program, so everyone kind of thought that the policy world was just imaginary. But it's not. We actually do make a difference. And so it was really fun to go there and to kind of talk to all the different groups, both again kind of public sector and then some kind of more in the private sector, and see how it all comes together, see how the magic is made, if you will, or lack thereof. So those are the 2 big ones. I think the internship and the DC trip were pretty amazing.
I think the most important program activities were the group projects, because that is where all of the skills that we learned came together, and we had to implement our knowledge in a coherent way. And I mean, that helped us as students, as people who are learning these new concepts, to sort of to better understand things and make the connections in our brains. But I think it also was a confidence booster. You know, it showed us, it demonstrated to ourselves that we were capable of doing this work, of talking about it in a coherent way, in a meaningful way, in a professional way. But it also helped us, improved our confidence in the technology of biofuels as a whole, because it showed us that yes, the numbers do make sense. All the theories support the concept of biofuels as a whole, and it is a viable technology.
So I think the most challenging aspect of being a participant in the Igerter program was really kind of finding my place within the program. You know, I was kind of the first political scientist and kind of one of the oddball social scientists that was part of the program. Kind of when I first got here, there seemed to be a little bit of this kind of vacuum, this kind of untried territory. So there was kind of all the scientists that were together, and then kind of the social scientists were kind of this group, this unknown entity. And so, you know, within my own program, I was seen as much more of a kind of scientific, technical researcher at that time. So they kind of left me alone. And then, you know, in the Igerter program, I was definitely not a scientist or an engineer. So, you know, they also kind of said, oh, you're one of those kind of social scientists. So I had to kind of, I don't know, I felt like I had to traverse new territory and make a place for myself in the program, which wasn't bad, but it was certainly a challenge at the beginning, kind of just figuring out kind of how it all worked and what I actually wanted to do and what I wanted to represent as part of the Igerter program and as a social scientist. And I think, you know, it's very challenging for a multidisciplinary program like this to find its perfect balance. I think that to really work, there has to be expertise, kind of equal expertise that's represented across all the disciplines. And I think originally that was also a little bit different. So, you know, going and trying to kind of figuring out bioenergy and kind of figuring out all the aspects of the interdisciplinary parts. You know, there's some areas that were much stronger than others, and so I was kind of drawn towards those or kind of deterred from others. So that also kind of was that part of just figuring out what was really going on and how I was going to fit in it. But I think the other big challenge was also trying to kind of convince people that I could actually successfully operate in both spheres. So when I talked a lot about policy stuff with some of the Igerter instructors, you know, there was a little bit more kind of doubt or just, you know, just unfamiliarity. And then when I went to the political science department and initially told them what I wanted to study, there's a bit of an uproar. Because, you know, ultimately what I study is inherently political. It talks about the global political economy, the international realm, power dynamics between state and non-state actors, and even developed and developing states, really global production networks, industrial and innovation policy, the list goes on, right? But when I announced to them that I was going to kind of study all of those things and those frameworks in relation to or in the context of, you know, synthetic, paraffinic, bio-based aviation-grade kerosene, there was not such happy faces at that point. There was some kind of critical kind of doubt that would actually be a viable project and something that I could carry off. And it wasn't kind of natural or innate for the political science department to go back to the Igerter kind of instructors to really kind of have a dialogue about that to see how possible it was. So it was kind of an uphill battle convincing people that I'm, you know, at least mediocre, you know, smart enough to kind of operate in both spheres relatively successfully overall. And we'll see if that actually happens, right? That's always the challenge. But no, it was really kind of showing kind of both sides that this dissertation research is new and exciting and talking about emerging commodity, which is very rare actually that we see, and one that's feasible in the international arena, but then kind of convincing them that all the parts really do come together in a way that is quite fascinating.
I think one of the most challenging aspects of the program was in the second semester of coursework, where we learned about the economics and the government policy aspects of biofuels. I think the teaching during that period was below par, and that made it difficult to stay engaged in the program. Another challenge of the Igerter program is that the additional coursework and the additional activities tended to extend my PhD experience by about another year, and that made an already pretty big challenge even more difficult. Although I think that the additional knowledge that I learned and the experiences I had made up for the extra time that it took to wrap up my PhD.
The Igerter program was a really great experience for me and a really positive one. I think in terms of the challenges, the time involved in the program was significant in terms of the 2 training courses we took, in terms of the out-of-discipline coursework we were supposed to do, the internship and things like that. So it really was a commitment to be part of the program, and it was a good commitment, one that really paid off, I think, in my case. But it was, it definitely did add a little bit of time to my process here in graduate school.